Hello, this is Corey, and in today's core concept, we will take a quick look at arrays in PowerShell and also look at a couple of different string methods, specifically split and substring. So before we go into those methods, let's start our conversation way back at the beginning with just simple variables. So we've gone through this before, but let's touch on it again. So let's say I have this hello world variable. Hello world is a string. That's the data type of hello world. And then using this equal sign, which is an assignment operator, we are going to put it into this variable that we're calling my var. And my var is sort of a box that contains the string. So let's run line 4. If we go and we just call upon the variable, we return what's inside. And if we do get type to see what data type this variable is, we see that it's a string. So again, the analogy here is it's like a box. You can put this cat inside of it, metaphorically speaking. Um, that cat is your data type. That cat's your data. You can stick it in the box, but it doesn't have to just be Schrodinger's cat. It could also be his dog. You can remove the cat, put a dog in, um, so on and so forth. So instead, we're going to look at a different variable type called an array. It's one of the collections in PowerShell, and that is more like an egg carton. So if you notice, an egg carton has these different slots. In the analogy here, the eggs would be like your data. So you're going to be putting the data into each of the slots, but it's still an overall singular structure. So let's take a look at that now. In PowerShell, if you want to instantiate an empty array, line 8 would be your syntax. We're going to run line 9. Let's say we have 5 different names that we want to put into our egg carton. So we'll go ahead and run that, and I'll clear my screen. And then I'll look at the array. I'll call on this variable, and you see it returns everything inside the array, so all 5 names. Now, if I do get type, I see that this is an array. The base type is system.array. Now let's say I just wanted to get to the first egg in the egg carton. What if I just want to get name 1? Well, in PowerShell, the way you would isolate that value, one of the ways is you would type in the variable name followed by an open square bracket, the number of the slot, and a closing square bracket, and return it. It'll return what's in slot 1. You might say, well, Corey, why is it a 0 here instead of a 1? And the reason would be in any kind of programming language, when you're doing enumeration, you're always, for the most part, going to always start with 0 as that opening position and then iterate from there. So in this array example, if we want slot 3, we would put in 2, and then there it is, name 3 comes back. So the opening position, that first position, is always going to be 0. So if we actually did like now a get type on this, we see that that is a string. So this is an array of strings, and it has 5 positions. Now, what if I had a 6th name and I wanted to add it to the proverbial egg carton here? Well, there is an add method for an array, but notice if we run it, it returns this error. It says collection was of a fixed size. So this kind of a collection is a fixed size, which is why most of the time when I'm using array kinds of objects, I like to use what's called an array list. And an array list will allow us to expand and contract and add and remove things. So we're not just bound by a fixed set like in this egg carton analogy. If we wanted to, instead of just a dozen eggs, we wanted there to be 2 dozen. With an array list, you can expand it like that dynamically. So if you notice the way that we want to define that, because if I just typed in what's highlighted, that's only going to be an array by default. So I have to do what's called, in programming, they have something called strongly and weakly typed. And type in that example is the data type that goes into the variable. So if you do open closing square bracket system.collections.arraylist and you instantiate that, and then we see what type that is, it says name array list. So just about on strongly typed, let's say I had this variable and I have 6, and notice how it's inside of two single quotation marks. If I do this and then I take a look at my var.getType, it's a string. But let's say I wanted this to be interpreted as an integer. If I define that up front and then run it, and then again do get type, now you see it's an int32 because I've told it, hey, anything that I'm putting into this variable, I want it to be an integer. So you're strongly typing it. The same is true with this array list. So again, let's put our 5 names into this array list. Let's clear our screen, and then we'll do array list, if I could spell it. And we've got our 5 names. Now I've got my 6th name. Let's try it again. Remember, we got our error up here, but let's see what happens with our array list. Yep, different response. Let's go ahead and see what happens when we call on the variable. Oh, we've got our 6 names. So again, an array list is really handy if you're wanting to dynamically add stuff to your collection. So let's get to the string method portion of our discussion today. We're going to have this string. We'll say this is like something you would get maybe from a domain object, where there's some property that gives you like an organizational unit, a domain name, and then a name of a person. And this has actually been an example before in my career where I needed to isolate a certain part of the string. So let's say this is the string you're working with. Let's go ahead and call on it. So there's our string. Let's just say that you want the my name portion. You're not at all interested in anything else in this string. You just want to grab and sort of pluck out the my name. One of the things you can do is you can do a method called split. So with strings, and actually since PowerShell is object-oriented, everything is an object, which means it's an instantiation of a class. So it's going to have both methods, and it's also going to have properties. So if we look at my string and just do a dot, it'll pull up this menu where we can kind of peruse the various methods. Now, methods are class functions that do some kind of an operation on that object. So in this case, we're going to look at split. Now, what split does is in this first input for the split method, it is going to split the string based on this character. So if you look at line 46, our first input is the /. So that's what it will split the string on every time it encounters one. And then this, after the comma, this number is actually going to be the number of times it'll split. The thing is, you might sometimes encounter a situation where you don't know how many of those you'll find, and maybe you know how many, what the range might be. But if you do like 12, which is way more than what I have in my string example, it's going to just split it the maximum number of times it encounters the character in that case, even if you have, this number being larger than the amount of times that character shows up in the string. So let's go ahead and run this. We're going to do myString.splitString, splitting on the / up to 12 times, and assigning the results to this new variable called split string. So we've got that. Now, if I take a look at split string, I now see it looks an awful lot like an array. And in fact, if you do get type on this, you see that the base type is system.array. So it's basically an array of strings. Now, what if I wanted to always get to the last position of an array? We had talked about this before, where if I wanted to say, now that I have this split string object, if I wanted to get to the first position, we talked about how you would put opening square bracket, 0, closing square bracket, and you've got the first slot. So we've got OU returned. A nifty thing about getting to different parts of that egg carton is if you're always wanting to get to the last thing, if let's say you don't know how many eggs are in your proverbial egg carton, and you know though that you want to get to whatever the last position is, one way you can do that is through just typing in the value of -1. If we do that here, notice how it immediately got us the last position. So we could, if we were just going and enumerating up, 2 would work as well. But if we, in the event that we don't know what that last position is, we can just do -1. We'll always get to that last position. So very handy there. Let us talk a little bit too about substrings. So substrings, let's say let's clear our screen. And this time our string is this, hello, this is my string with important data within. And that's our string. What if we're looking to get to just that part of the string? You can do something called the substring method. And if you notice here in line 82, substring has the first input needs to be the starting position of the string. So if we go back, we know that H will be the 0 position, and then E will be 1, and so forth. So if we, that first 29, that'll be the 29th character. And then the second value, which we have as 10, that's going to be from that starting position of 29, the number of characters after that point that you're going to be capturing. So in this case, I already happen to know that 29 and 10 is the values that I need. So let's go ahead and run this. And notice how it returned important. So we were able to isolate that piece of this string and just have it in this variable. So now this variable just has that important piece of data in it, and we can then take that and use it in other ways. So that is all I have for us today. I'd like to thank you for watching. Hopefully some of this was interesting, and I'll see you in the next Core Concepts video.